Hey, good morning. Welcome to Grace Point Church. You can have a seat this morning. Thanks so much for being here to worship with us today. My name is Brett Ferguson, and I'm a member here at Grace Point. Hey, if you have your Bible, and I hope you bring a physical copy of your Bible with you on Sundays, you can go ahead and take that out and open to Luke chapter 19. We'll be in Luke chapter 19 today. Hey, before we get to that passage, while you're finding it, when I was a kid, I grew up in a generic cereal kind of house. How many of you grew up in a generic cereal household? Not very many of you. Okay, how many of you grew up in a name brand cereal household? I thought you people were so rich when I was growing up. The really, really rich people had toaster strudels available in their freezer, right? That was like an extreme luxury. But I grew up in a generic cereal household. To remember, I was thinking back to what kind of cereal was it that we had in our house, and there were two that came to mind. I couldn't remember the name of the first one. It turns out that it was called simply Crispy Hexagons. All you had to remember was actually the shape and the texture of the cereal, and you knew what it was. Anybody else grow up in a Crispy Hexagons kind of house? I think we have a picture of the Crispy Hexagons somewhere. It looks very, very generic. There we go. There's the Crispy Hexagons. This makes me laugh, like Polygon didn't want any of that, right? We had to go with the hexagons. Octagons would be way too many. My brother Justin's here. Justin was a big Cocoa Dino Bites guy. We had bag cereal Cocoa Dino Bites, right? What you didn't get if you grew up in a generic cereal household was what the fancy cereals did in the late 80s and 90s, and that is you could actually save your cereal box tops or your UPCs, and you could redeem them for some kind of prize. You could actually mail them in. So the way this would work is there would be a prize, and it took 2 or 4 cereal UPCs, and you could cut those out, and you could mail them in. This is how it worked. You would actually cut out your box tops. You would put them in an envelope with a check for $1 or $2 because you had to cover the small shipping and handling fee. There was a form you would fill out, and then 3 months later, a prize would show up at your door. It might be a Garfield reflector for your bike or possibly a spoon that changes colors. And when I tell that story, I just reminded of how much spare time people in the 80s and 90s had. Can you just imagine going through all that? Listen, as someone who spends most of my career trying to sell food products to a certain local retailer, I can't imagine sitting down with a merchant and saying, this is our idea for growing sales. People are going to cut off box tops and we're going to send them a spoon that changes colors in 3 months. But this is a financial transaction that you're doing here with the cereal people. You could take your UPC and you would redeem the prize. You could redeem it. And so I want us to be thinking about this idea of redemption today as we kick off Holy Week. Redemption's at the very heart of it. The definition of redemption is this. It's a financial transaction, and it means to gain possession of something in exchange for payment. Back in the day, we were gaining possession of the magic changing colored spoon by exchanging for that, payment for that of the UPCs. And redemption is very much at the heart of the next week in the Christian calendar. Matter of fact, Paul said it this way in the book of Galatians chapter 3. He says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hanged on a tree. The idea here is this, is that we were the ones that needed to be redeemed, that we were actually cursed under the law, and that the redemption for us came by the form of Jesus himself giving his life for us. And so today, as we reflect on Luke 19 and Jesus' triumphal entrance into the city of Jerusalem, I want us to have redemption on our mind. And here's going to be our big idea for the message today, is this, that only King Jesus can redeem. That only King Jesus can redeem our lives together. Let's read it together. Luke chapter 19, we're going to start in verse 28. And when he said these things, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And when he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany, at the mount that is called Olivet, he sent 2 of his disciples. Now let's just stop right here. Before we go any further, I want us to just begin Where Jesus' Holy Week journey begins, it says that he was walking over the Mount of Olives. Jesus is entering into the city of Jerusalem from the east side, and you don't have to be an expert in Middle Eastern geography to kind of be familiar with this area. If any of you have seen a picture of the city of Jerusalem that looks something like this panoramic picture, this picture is taken from the Mount of Olives. This is probably one of the most famous photograph spots of the city of Jerusalem. We've seen pictures like this all over. So there's the Mount of Olives, and then kind of where the trees are at the bottom of the pictures, that is a valley called the Kidron Valley. It's not very big. If it was in Arkansas, it'd be the Kidron Holler. It's not very wide. And you go across there and you can look into the city of Jerusalem, and this is the path that Jesus chooses to begin his journey of redemption. But you know what? Jesus isn't the first person to walk this journey. Actually, 1,000 years before Jesus, there was another king who made his way over the Mount of Olives. His name was David. He was the greatest king in the history of the nation of Israel. But the difference in David's journey and Jesus' journey is David was actually going the other way. When David crossed over the Mount of Olives, he was going from Jerusalem up into the mountains, while Jesus is coming from the mountains into the city. David was actually fleeing. You see, David, as great of a king as he was, he had committed terrible sin. He had committed adultery, and then he tried to cover it up by committing murder. And while God was gracious to forgive him of the eternal consequences of those sins, God did not relieve from David the practical consequences of his actions. He had to live with the real-world consequences for his sin. And by the way, there's always real-world consequences when we disobey God. God told David that the sword would never depart from his house. And what happened that day for David to have to flee the city of Jerusalem is this. David's favorite son, Absalom, had just undertaken a 4-year campaign to undermine David's leadership and to overthrow David as king. Absalom actually succeeds, and he gets so much love from the people that he actually declares himself king. And once he declares himself king, David has to flee. You can read about this story in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 15. This is what it says. Then David said to all of his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, "Arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape from Absalom. Go quickly, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down ruin on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword." David has to flee from his son for his life. We see more of the story later in 2 Samuel 15 and verse 30. It says this. It describes David's escape from the city over the Mount of Olives. David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot and with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up weeping as they went. Can you just imagine this scene for a minute? This is David, the dude who killed bears and lions to protect his sheep, the man who slayed Goliath, the greatest king in the history of Israel. And he's sneaking out of town with his head covered and barefoot. That's an important detail to the story. In ancient Israel, covering your head and walking barefoot was a public way to recognize brokenness and humiliation. It was a way that people would kind of display mourning or shame or humiliation or grief. And can you just imagine what's going on in David's mind as he's doing this, the brokenness that he would experience? The father having to run away from his own son who's out to kill him. The shame of all that he had done wrong, probably crushing back down on him. And here in this journey where David has to escape because of shame, in those exact steps 1,000 years later, Jesus comes walking in, and he arrives not in shame, not in brokenness, not in grief. He arrives in triumphal victory. And I just wonder if maybe we don't just need to take a moment and just remember this today, that there is no path of shame in your life that Jesus cannot redeem. There's no path of shame in your life that Jesus cannot redeem. There's no path of shame in your life that Jesus cannot redeem. And I don't know how you came into the house today, what your week or what your months have been like. I don't know that if you've fallen into that trap of addiction again. I don't know that if you've got stuck in that wretched, broken behavior again. I don't know if the voice of shame is talking to you again today. I don't know if that thing that just kind of binds you up all the time is back again. And I just want us to start today by remembering that there's no path of shame in your life that Jesus can't redeem. Whatever shame, whatever sin, whatever you brought into the house with you today, I hope that when you leave here, you can know this, that redemption is possible only through King Jesus. Let's keep reading. Verse 29, when he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany at the mount that is called Olivet, he sent two of his disciples, saying, go to the village in front of you, where on entering you can find a colt tied on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you why you're untying it, you shall say this, the Lord has need of it. And so those who were sent away went and found it just as he had told them. And they were untying the colt. Its owner said to them, why are you untying the colt? And they said, the Lord has need of it. This is always, I got to admit, this is always kind of a weird part of the story for me, right? Like, is Jesus orchestrating a donkey kidnapping with his disciples? Hijacking, a donkey hijacking with his disciples. And I think what we're going to see in the next few minutes is actually, there is so much more going on here than Jesus and his disciples absconding with a donkey. If we look closely, we'll actually see that there are some reasons here that we can believe that Jesus alone is fit to redeem us. And the first thing we'll see just here in this brief story with the donkey is this, that Jesus alone can redeem because Jesus alone has unique authority over all things. Jesus is only capable of redeeming because he has unique authority over all things. Check out what's happening here. Let me just tell you what's not happening here. Jesus did not say to his disciples, hey, it would really be nice if I had a donkey to ride in this city. Can we maybe break up and see if we can find one? Maybe go into the next town, see if someone just happened to leave a donkey laying around, tied up somewhere, and just go ahead and grab that and bring it back. That's not at all what happened. Jesus actually says to his disciples, hey, I want you to go into that city right over there, and as soon as you walk in, you're going to see that there's going to be a donkey that's tied up. I want you to go ahead and take that donkey right there, and then, by the way, the owner's going to come and talk to you. Here's what he's going to say, and here's what you need to say back. And then I love this kind of understated verse here where it just says that they went and they found it just as he had told them. And I just wonder if we need this reminder today, that there is no situation or circumstance or event or person in your life that is outside the authority of Jesus. All the way down to where you tie up your donkey. He's in charge of it all. He's in charge of it all. Nothing catches him by surprise. He knows exactly what is going on. The book of Ephesians says it this way, that God has seated him far above all rule and authority and power and dominion and above every name that is named, that not only in this age but also in the age to come, he would put all things under his feet. The book of Colossians says that all things were created by him and through him so that he could have preeminence over all things. The book of Hebrews says that he upholds all things by the word of his power. 1 Peter says that he sits at the right hand of God with angels, authorities, and powers, and they're all subjected to him. Just a reminder to whatever's going on in your life today, that there is no situation in your life that is outside the control of Jesus, outside the authority of Jesus. Secondly, if you look at this, Jesus isn't just hijacking a donkey here. These villages, this village of Bethphage and village of Bethany, are actually two villages that are about 800 yards apart. They're really close. And this is a place where Jesus had spent a significant amount of time. 3 of Jesus' best friends lived in the village of Bethany: Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. And you might be familiar with the story that Lazarus, while Jesus is alive, Lazarus ends up dying. And Jesus comes to the grave of Lazarus after he had been dead for quite some time. And Jesus is there and he's moved by the brokenness of the people around him. Everyone around him is crying and weeping, and Jesus actually is moved to tears in this moment, and he raises Lazarus from the dead. Now, in these small villages, that would have been a spectacle that no one had ever seen. The authority of Jesus was well known. There was living proof of it in the person of Lazarus. And so when Jesus sends his disciples into the village to get the donkey, he tells them, tell the owner, the Lord has need of it. They would have known exactly who was talking and what was going on. That word Lord, it's not just a polite title. It's the Greek word kurios, and it's a claim of ownership, of authority. In the everyday Greek, this word could refer to the legal owner of a property. It has the idea of someone who has the right to decide over something. And so what Jesus is really saying here is, hey, tell the owner of the donkey that the ultimate owner of the donkey actually needs it. Jesus is speaking as if it's his donkey, which is another reminder for us today. When we say that Jesus has authority over all things, what we're not saying is that he just has authority over the people and circumstances of your life and of the world around you. What we're really saying is that there is no area of your life that Jesus does not want authority over. There's no area of your life that he does not want authority over. In the book of Matthew, at the end, when Jesus is giving his great commission to his disciples, how does he start off that great commission? He says, all authority has been given to me. And so again, we see discipleship is really an authority question in our lives. Who is going to be in ultimate control? Jesus, King Jesus, alone redeems because he has authority over our lives. Not just the circumstances that are around us, although he's fully in control of those. He has authority of every square inch of my heart, of my mind, of my affections, of my actions. He wants control of all of it. And what we're going to see as we go along today is that Jesus' authority that he has is the practical outworking of his position as the promised king. Let's keep reading together in verse 35. And they brought it to Jesus, and throwing their cloaks on the colt, they sent Jesus on it. And as he rode along, they spread their coats on the road. And as they were drawing near, already on the way down the Mount of Olives, a whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen, saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. As Jesus enters into the city, riding the donkey, the crowd gathers. This is a huge scene. They're taking their coats off. They're putting them on the road. They have the palm branches. They're putting those on the road. Think of that as kind of creating a red carpet, a welcome entrance for the king. Some of them were probably ripping the leaves off of the palm branches and throwing it in the air, and that this was going to be a huge celebration, kind of a ticker tape parade. Now, stick with me here for just a moment, because this can be very easily lost on us today. But in Jesus' day, there are some things that are happening in and around this triumphal entrance that mark a significant change in how Jesus talks about himself. And what I want us to see here today is that in this whole scene, the most important thing that we can see is that Jesus is stepping forward to take on a title that he really has not taken on publicly before. To see the full effect of what's happening here, we're going to get some help from the Gospel of Matthew as he looks at the same story. Matthew chapter 21 is Matthew's account of the triumphal entrance. But right before that, in Matthew chapter 20, there's this crazy interaction Jesus has with two blind men. We'll read it together. As they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him. And behold, there were two blind men sitting by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. And the crowd rebuked them, telling them to be silent. But they cried out all the more, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. And stopping, Jesus called them and said, what do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, Lord, let our eyes be opened. And Jesus, in pity, touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. Now, at first glance, this story looks like a pretty normal New Testament gospel account of Jesus interacting with people who needed something from him. We've seen people yell at Jesus and grab his attention and ask for healing before. But if you look a little bit closer, this is actually a significant moment because of how they refer to Jesus. They say, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. And in this instance, this is the first time that Jesus publicly accepts this title, Son of David. They say, Son of David, and Jesus says, yes, that's me. What do you want me to do for you? This has not happened up until this point. Matter of fact, throughout the Gospel of Matthew, other people refer to Jesus as Son of David, and he doesn't publicly ever confirm those words. There's an earlier story in Matthew chapter 9 where there's two other blind men who find Jesus, and they yell at him, have mercy on us, Son of David. And Jesus actually takes them inside of a house in private, and he heals them. And when they go away, he tells them, don't tell anybody else about this. There's another moment in Matthew chapter 15 when a woman is asking Jesus to heal her demon-possessed daughter, and she shouts out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Matthew actually goes out of his way to say that in this, Jesus did not answer her one word. Jesus would eventually go on and heal her daughter, but not until she referred to him as another title when she called him Lord. And so Matthew's really locked in on this like Son of David title being a big deal. Matthew's account of the triumphal entrance, when the crowd is gathered around Jesus, he says that they're shouting this phrase. Matthew says it this way, that the crowds went before him and they followed him and they were shouting, Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Now listen, a lot of you are like, why are you talking about the Son of David? Like, what in the world are you talking about? Because to you and I, that title doesn't really mean much. But in the first century Palestine, that title meant everything. Absolutely everything. You see, this all, once again, goes back to David. That in 2 Samuel chapter 7, God had promised David that his throne would last for forever. And from that moment forward until the time of Jesus, Jewish people were expecting a future king, a descendant of David who would reign and restore God's kingdom. Jeremiah the prophet described it this way, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, a branch off of David's tree. And he will reign as king, and he will deal wisely, and he will execute justice in the righteous land. And so for the first time in a bold and public way, Jesus is saying, hey, I'm that guy. I'm that one. And so one of the reasons that only Jesus can redeem because he is the promised king. He's not just a king, he is the promised king. The kidnapped donkey is actually really important in this part. Actually, this goes back 600 years before Jesus. The prophet Zechariah said it this way about the promised king that was coming to save Israel. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Jesus isn't just a king. He's the king. He's the promised king. And it's the promised king that the Bible said would be a perfect king. The book of Isaiah chapter 11 gives a description of what life is like under the rule of this promised king. It says that the promised king will bring a world where everything is finally made right, that he will rule with perfect wisdom and justice. There'll be no favoritism, no corruption, no missed facts. It says that he will defend the weak and the vulnerable, and he'll deal rightly with evil. His reign will produce deep and lasting peace. It actually says that things that are natural enemies will begin to live life in harmony together. A wolf will lie down with a lion. Not just people, but creation will experience peace. The world will become full of the knowledge of God as deep as the waters cover the seas, and that people from all nations will be drawn to him, finding hope under his rule. So when the promised king reigns fully, justice is perfect, peace is complete, and the whole world is restored under the knowledge of God. Now listen, here's the point for us. Lock in for a second. Everything Jesus is doing around this triumphal entry, as he steps up and he takes this title, he is pushing these people to a decision point. He is saying, I came to be the king. You can either crown me or you can kill me, but there's no middle ground. Crown me or kill me, but there's no middle ground. You know, one of the things I love about Holy Week is this. You know, Christmas It can be kind of easy at Christmas time as we reflect on the birth of our Savior. It can be kind of easy to get caught up in the sentimentality of it all, right? There's just so much going on. You got these fond memories of being a kid and waking up on Christmas morning, and there's all the food and the family celebrations and all the special music and the church candlelight service. And it can be really easy for Christmas to just get us, even people who are non-believing, into kind of this mushy, warm, fuzzy place of like, oh, there's a God who loves us. There's no room for sentimentality this week. Because what Jesus is doing and what he is saying throughout the beginning on Palm Sunday, throughout the course of Holy Week, is so radical and so extreme that either he is a raving lunatic or what he's saying is 100% true. There's no just warm, fuzzy middle ground. In the way that Jesus came to these people, forcing a decision, crown me or kill me, that's the way that I think he comes to all of us. I would offer this, that Jesus comes to each of us the same way. He's saying to you and to me today, crown me or kill me, but for heaven's sake, don't just like me. Don't like me. He can't be liked. Either he's to be believed and to be under his rule and his authority, or he's to be rejected completely. And we understand what's happening in the triumphal entry. There's no longer an option for us to just kind of have this romantic, Jesus is a sage, wise man, good teacher kind of guy. The hippie out in the wilderness giving really good life tips isn't an option. The idea that he's just a great teacher or maybe a political revolutionary isn't really an option. It's no longer to see his message as just like tips on how to live a better life. There's simply no middle ground. Hey, listen, I just want you to know something about Jesus. That Jesus is not really here to just help you get through the next hard thing in your life. Jesus didn't come to give you a little inspiration to put on the lock screen of your iPhone. He's not that interested in being a therapist or a self-help guru. He's not a souped-up version of Brene Brown or David Goggins trying to make you a better version of yourself. He came to be king and authority over everything. He wants all of it. And so for us today, it's just a reminder, crown him or kill him, but don't like him. In this town, in this place, where there's a lot of really smart, successful people, and it's still okay to kind of have some level of religiosity, there's an epidemic of people who just like Jesus. They like the idea of being able to pray to him once in a while. They might even like the idea of coming to a church on Sunday and being in a community of faith or leaving with a little bit of inspiration. And I just think Jesus just wants us to stop for a minute and say, is he going to be king or not? Because that's what he came to be. He's the promised king. The crowd is cheering, Hosanna, son of David, save us. Of course, we'll find out over the next week that the crowd actually is really confused about what exactly it is they need to be saved from. And they're also confused about who exactly Jesus came to be. You know who's actually got a really clear picture of this crown him or kill him idea of Jesus? Is actually the bad guys in the story, the Pharisees. The baddies understand exactly what's going on here. Look at what happens in verse 39 and 40. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd told him, teacher, rebuke your disciples. Hey, they're calling you the son of David. Hey, they're worshiping you as God. You can't let that stand. And Jesus says to them, well, if they were silent, even the very stones would cry out. Jesus' response is that his authority, his godship, his kingship is undeniable. Only King Jesus redeems. Only King Jesus redeems because he has unique authority. He has authority not just over the circumstances of our lives, but every square inch of our heart and our mind and our affections. He's the King, the promised Son of David who will bring righteousness and peace to the earth. And anyone who claims him can't just be an admirer from afar, crown him or kill him, but whatever you do, don't just like him. There's one other incredible picture of Jesus in this passage. And it ends with this moment of Jesus' compassion, and I just want us to end today by just reflecting on the fact that only Jesus can redeem because Jesus is full of compassion. Look at how the story ends. Verse 41. When Jesus drew near to the city, he wept over it, saying, would that you, even you, had known this day the things that make for peace. But now they're hidden from your eyes. For the day will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave a stone upon another in you because you did not know the time of your visitation. One of 3 times in the New Testament where Jesus weeps. He wept at the grave of Lazarus. He was moved by the brokenness of the people around him, even though he knew full well that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Human emotion is not unmoving to Jesus. It actually moves him. He weeps in the Garden of Gethsemane as he dreads what is about to happen to him, even though he will submit to it, the Bible says, gladly. And he weeps here as he overlooks the city. I think there's 2 things that move Jesus to weep here. The first thing that I think is breaking Jesus' heart is he's broken by their blindness and rejection. Would that you, even you, knew what it is that makes for peace. What he's saying here is, if only you understood what your real need is. You think peace means victory over the oppressive Romans. You want to change your circumstances, but what you really need is a changed heart. Your real problem isn't the Romans. Your real problem is your own sinfulness. Jesus is broken by a missed opportunity. Not that God had failed, but that his people had every chance to obey him, and yet they missed it. They had the ancient scriptures. They had the prophets. They had Jesus walking among them, doing amazing works in the flesh, and still they don't recognize what is happening. Jesus isn't broken because of their ignorance due to lack of information. He's broken by their spiritual blindness, even in the presence of a full revelation of who he is. The second thing that I think is breaking Jesus is that when Jesus is rejected, there are consequences to that are devastating in our lives. 30 years after this moment, in 70 AD, the Romans would in fact surround the city of Jerusalem. They would barricade it and they would lock it in. They would burn and completely destroy most of the city. They would burn the temple. The temple had become a storehouse for gold and silver. The fire of the burning of the temple actually led to the gold and silver being melted, and it ran down into the cracks between the stones. Historians tell us that Roman soldiers returned to the temple, overturning every single stone, looking for the melted gold and silver until not one stone was left upon another. And we don't talk about this very much, but it's just a reminder for us. When we reject Jesus' kingship, there's a consequence to that. There's obviously an eternal consequence to that. The wages of sin is death. There's an eternal consequence of death and eternal separation from Jesus. That's the consequence of sin. But I want us to think today also about there's a very temporal consequence to sin as well. From the Garden of Eden until today, whenever sin is present, something is dying. Sin doesn't just separate us from God eternally, it kills things in our lives today. Marriages get killed because of sin. Relationships get killed because of sin. Families get killed because of sin. Happiness gets killed because of sin. Joy gets killed because of sin. When there is sin in our lives, something is dying. The wages of sin is always death. And God doesn't approach that. Jesus doesn't approach that as some heartless dictator king. He approaches it as a broken, compassionate king. Us experiencing those consequences, it breaks his heart. And so I just want us to see this today, that Jesus redeems because he's full of compassion. And if you need redemption today, I just want you to know that he's a safe place. He's a safe place to go. In 1996, Pepsi began a promotion that was called Pepsi Stuff. This was their advertising, drink Pepsi, get stuff. I just want you to know, I'm not trading a Diet Coke for a Pepsi so I can get that letter jacket right there, okay? That's not happening for me. This was the biggest promotion Pepsi had ever run. You could actually take your Pepsi UPCs, mail them into the Pepsi company, and you could get a blue Pepsi letter jacket. They ran a series of TV commercials to go along with this promotion to advertise it, and one of the commercials featured a Pepsi-branded McDonnell Douglas AV-8 Harrier II jet aircraft that a teenager drove to school, landed on the lawn, which Pepsi offered and claimed it could be redeemed for 7 million Pepsi points. John Leonard was a 21-year-old business student who saw the commercial and read the fine print of the Pepsi points scam. And he realized that you could purchase Pepsi points for 10 cents a point. So John convinced 5 investors to give him $700,008.50. Had to add the $850 for the shipping and handling, which seems like a good deal for a Harrier jet, honestly. He sent the money to Pepsi. Pepsi refused. They said, no, this commercial is a joke. Of course, this ends up going to actual court because that's what we do here. And of course, the court sided with Big Soda like they always do. The judge said, no, this is actually not there's some hilarious findings, actually. The court, they centered around the idea that no reasonable person could ever think that Pepsi was offering a $37.4 million jet for only $700,000. The judge said, the youth featured in the commercial is a highly improbable pilot, one who could barely be trusted with the keys to his parents' car, much less the prized aircraft of the United States Marine Corps. The judge would go on to say, no school would provide a landing space for a student's fighter jet or condone the disruption the jet would cause. Leonard's case was rejected. Pepsi continued airing the commercials, although they upped the price of the Harrier to 700 million Pepsi points and added a just kidding disclaimer to it. You know, I think that very few people in the world today need much convincing that we need redemption in our life. There's a $15 billion self-help industry in this country that says we know full well that we're broken and we need to be redeemed. Freddie DeBoer is a liberal author and cultural critic. He wrote an article called You Can't Fake It. This is a little bit long, but I just want you to listen to this. We've got a political critique of the ways that notions of human worth are dictated by traditional inequalities of race and sex and class, and a set of political concepts like self-care that are designated to fight the negative effects of that. We've got a self-help culture that constantly counsels that everyone is a ray of brilliant and unique light that alone can shine the way through a dark world. We've got an increasingly woke world of marketing and goods that sells its products by selling you to yourself. A gym I pass by sometimes used to have a sign that said, join the body acceptance movement, neglecting the fact that if we all accepted our bodies, there would be no such thing as a gym. We've got a medical industry busily developing all manner of powerful drugs to manage all of this anxiety and insecurity and feelings of inadequacy. We've got our social media tools to craft and perfect and share the idealized version of ourselves, curated and managed to the millimeter so that we can present exactly what we want to present, to put our best foot forward with digital precision. And none of it works. I've known people in my life who were the most outwardly secure, confident, who never betrayed a hint of doubt or guilt or remorse, who projected cool at all times, who were quite popular, who received plaudits and positive affirmation from others at all times, who were academically and professionally successful, who had money and respect, and who cultivated the kind of micro-celebrity that is common to contemporary life. And yet the flow of life revealed that inside they hated themselves fully and completely, and with a bitterness that I can't imagine enduring. None of that stuff mattered. None of it could get at the core self-hatred within. They could never fool themselves. And then he ends it by saying this, and I begin to wonder, is this the human condition? If I could baptize Freddie's words, I would say this. What he's saying is, we're all trying to redeem ourselves, and we just can't get it done. And your redemption is much closer to redeeming a Harrier jet than a Garfield reflector on the bike. And what I mean by that is this: the cost is just too much. We can never fully get there on our own. So today we come around this idea that only King Jesus can redeem. He's got the authority. He is the perfect promised King. He's full of compassion. And the question for all of us today is this: are you under the authority of King Jesus? Are you living under the rule of King Jesus? And all week long, I've had two people in my mind. One is, I think there are probably some of you here today that you're really good Bible Belt Christians. This is a part of your life on a regular basis. You kind of have some level of relationship with Jesus maybe, or at least a relationship with a church and with some type of religious practice. And I just want you to know, if you've never come to a time or a place where you said, hey, Jesus, you're not just my assistant, you're not just my therapist, you're not just my inspiration guy, you're my King. I want to come under your authority today. That would be a great spot to start. But then a lot of you are probably like me. You've made that decision at some point in your life, and here we are down the road, and it's time for a little reflection and just to pause and say, is every part of my life under the rule of King Jesus? Where do you find yourself today? I'm going to ask you to reflect for just a moment. Father, as we give you space and time to move, would you reveal to us places in our life where we're seeking redemption outside of you? Will you show us parts of our lives that are not under your rule and your reign? Father, we recognize redemption only comes through King Jesus and through King Jesus alone. We give you these moments.